The jungle breathes. It is alive, humid, endless and ancient. Beneath its emerald canopy, rivers coil like serpents. The air is heavy, thick with mist and the hum of unseen life. To the foreign eye, it is beautiful. To the soldier, it is a nightmare. This is Vietnam, a land of mountains and deltas, of villages hidden beneath palms and forests that stretch forever. But within its beauty lies a trap. A world where sight and sound deceive, where the enemy can vanish as easily as rain into the soil. Long before America arrived, Vietnam had been fighting for its soul. Empires had come and gone, the Chinese, the French, the Japanese. Each had sought to control it, each had been swallowed by it. By the mid-20th century, the jungle had already learned the sound of foreign boots. It had already buried men who spoke languages not its own, and now, in the decades to come, it would bury thousands more. The Vietnam War was not a single conflict. It was a storm that gathered across continents, born from fear, fed by politics, and fought in mud. To those who entered it, the jungle was not just terrain, it was an enemy, silent, patient, and eternal. The first to fall into the jungle's grasp were the French. After World War II, France sought to reclaim its colony of Indochina, believing empire could be restored. But the world had changed, and so had Vietnam. Under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, nationalist and revolutionary, the Viet Minh fought for independence with an unshakable will. They struck from the mountains, from the shadows, from the unseen. Villages fed them, jungles hid them. The French, armed with artillery and pride, believed discipline could conquer will. But they fought a war they did not understand. For 8 years they bled in the swamps and hills, chasing ghosts through the mist. They built fortresses in valleys, garrisons along rivers, yet the Viet Minh always returned. It ended in 1954 in a place called Dien Bien Phu. Surrounded and outnumbered, the French forces endured weeks of bombardment before surrendering. It was a defeat so total that it shattered the illusion of empire. When the tricolour fell, the world watched, and one nation in particular took notice. To the United States, the fall of Dien Bien Phu was more than a colonial loss. It was a warning. The world had entered a new kind of war, not of nations, but of ideologies. The Cold War divided the earth into 2 visions of the future: freedom and communism, democracy and revolution. To the policymakers in Washington, Vietnam was no longer a distant colony. It was the next tile in a row of dominoes. If one fell to communism, others would follow: Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, eventually the entire Pacific. In smoky rooms lit by green desk lamps, American advisors gathered around, maps marked with red lines. To them, Vietnam was not a jungle, it was a theory. Contain communism and peace would endure. Lose Vietnam and the world would unravel. Thus began America's slow descent into the same trap that had swallowed the French. At first it was only money and advisors, then came helicopters, weapons and bases. By 1964, it became war, declared. Not by conquest, but by fear. And as the first American boots touched the soil of Vietnam, no one imagined how deep that soil would drag them. They were young, some barely 19. Sons of farmers, mechanics, teachers. They had never seen a jungle before. They arrived in waves, stepping off helicopters into a heat that felt like breathing through water. The air buzzed with insects and the rot of life and death. Everywhere they looked was green, not the soft green of home, but the green of suffocation. They came with optimism, trained for victory. Their equipment gleamed, their uniforms crisp, their mission clear: to protect freedom. But within weeks, their boots were caked with mud and their smiles had vanished. The jungle did not fight fair. It hid its enemies, swallowed its dead, and turned men against their own senses. The Viet Cong moved unseen, striking from tunnels, vanishing before retaliation. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves could mean death. For many Americans, the first battle was not with the enemy, it was with the silence, the waiting, the endless screen that eroded the mind. Letters home spoke of confusion. We don't know who the enemy is. The old man who sells us rice by day may fire on us by night, and above them the helicopters thumped like iron hearts. The war had begun in earnest, but already it was beginning to rot from within. There was no front line in Vietnam, only jungle, only fear. Patrols moved through the trees in single file, rifles raised, nerves stretched to breaking. The air was thick with rain and sweat. Leeches clung to boots, mosquitoes swarmed like smoke. Wan Chiu, Viet Cong were everywhere and nowhere. They had no uniforms, no bases, no mercy. They planted traps of bamboo and steel, snare pits filled with sharpened stakes. A soldier could die without ever seeing his killer. When the ambush came, it came like lightning. A flash, a shout, a wall of bullets. Grenades exploded among the roots of giant trees. Then silence, broken only by the moans of the wounded. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors whipping the canopy. Medics dragged men from mud as gunfire echoed through the haze, and then the jungle closed again, erasing all trace of battle, leaving only the smell of cordite and blood. It was said the jungle had a voice. At night, it whispered through the trees. For the men who fought there, it was not the enemy they feared most. It was the land itself, indifferent, eternal, and hungry. By 1967, frustration had turned to fury. America unleashed its full strength, air power on a scale never before seen. B-52 bombers darkened the sky, raining death upon villages and forests. Napalm burned through the jungle, turning green to ash. Agent Orange stripped the leaves from trees and the skin from men. Villages were erased, rivers poisoned, skies blackened. The jungle screamed. Photographs from the time show shadows of children, burned into walls, soldiers walking through fire with blank eyes. One journalist called it hell made visible. Yet even in the inferno, the Viet Cong endured. They hid in tunnels deep beneath the ground, breathing through reeds, emerging, only to strike and vanish again. The more America destroyed, the more the jungle seemed to fight back. From above, it looked like victory, forests flattened, cities burning. But on the ground, the war was already lost. For every bomb that fell, a new enemy was born. For every village destroyed, hatred took root. The jungle had swallowed armies before. Now it was swallowing the most powerful nation on earth. Beneath the soil of Vietnam stretched another world. A labyrinth of tunnels, narrow, suffocating passages carved by hand through the red earth. Here the Viet Cong lived like shadows, eating, sleeping, planning their war against an empire. From these underground cities they emerged by night. Ghosts wrapped in black cloth, carrying rifles older than their fathers. To them, war was not fought for conquest, but for home. Every tree was a sentry, every villager a comrade. American patrols stumbled upon their entrances only by accident, a hole no wider than a shovel hidden beneath leaves. Drop a grenade inside, and the tunnel seemed silent. Step too close, and it answered with fire. The Viet Cong fought not to win territory but to wear time thin. They believed if they endured long enough, their enemy would grow tired, confused, divided. And they were right. Inside those tunnels, maps were drawn, mines assembled, messages whispered through the dark. Above, American search teams dropped flares into the night sky, lighting the jungle in ghostly silver. But the shadows always returned. Even captured, they said little. When asked how they could fight a war they could never hope to win, one replied, softly, "We don't need to win, we only need to outlast you." And so the jungle's heartbeat quickened, unseen, relentless. The year was 1968. The New Year festival, Tet, had arrived, a time of peace, prayer, and reunion. But as fireworks burst above Saigon, another light flickered in the distance. Gunfire. In a coordinated strike across the nation, the Viet Cong, in North Vietnamese army, launched the Tet offensive, an eruption of chaos that stunned the world. Over 100 cities ignited overnight. American embassies, bases, and outposts came under siege. In Saigon, fighting raged in the streets, in door-to-door, room-to-room. Television cameras captured the scenes in black and white. Soldiers crouched behind walls, civilians fleeing through smoke. the crack of rifles echoing down boulevards once lined with cafes. The offensive was crushed militarily within weeks, but in the living rooms of America, victory looked like defeat. The images told another truth, that the war was unwinnable, that the jungle had swallowed the purpose along with the men. Generals spoke of progress, reporters spoke of despair. Trust began to crumble. The war had reached its turning point, not on the battlefield, but in the hearts of those watching from afar. For the first time, a superpower looked into the mirror of television and saw its own exhaustion staring back. Across the ocean, another war was being fought. Not in jungles, but in the streets of America. Students marched through campuses, holding signs that read, "Bring them home." Mothers carried photographs of sons lost in fields they could not pronounce. The sound of drums and chants replaced the rhythm of helicopters. Folk songs became anthems. Burning draft cards lit up the night. The smell of tear gas drifted over Washington. For the first time in modern history, a nation turned against its own war. The young questioned the old. The streets challenged the halls of power. Veterans returning in silence found not welcome, but suspicion. In 1969, 500,000 people gathered on the National Mall, a river of humanity flowing toward the Capitol. Some cried. Some screamed. All demanded an end. The politicians wavered, but the war machine moved slowly. Promises were made, troops withdrawn, then sent again. The division at home became as deep as any trench abroad. The jungle had crossed the ocean, creeping into the American mind. Its fog now clouded belief itself, in leaders, in victory, in purpose. It ended not with triumph, but with evacuation. By 1975, after years of attrition, bombings, and peace talks that promised everything and delivered nothing, Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, was surrounded. As artillery thundered from the outskirts, American helicopters filled the sky. Crowds surged toward the embassy gates, desperate to flee. Mothers lifted infants toward the Marines above the walls. Soldiers threw down ropes for strangers. Television cameras captured the image that would haunt a generation. A helicopter perched atop a rooftop, rotors chopping the humid air as people climbed the ladder to escape. Inside the city, the last. Transmissions crackled over radio. "This is Saigon. We're closing shop." When the tanks of the North Vietnamese army rolled through the gates of the presidential palace, the war that had devoured 2 decades was finally over. The red flag rose. The city was renamed Ho Chi Minh City. The last echoes of empire faded into the tropical rain. The soldiers came home, but part of them never left the jungle. They returned to airports without parades, to streets that had forgotten their names. Many carried wounds no one could see, the flash of a flare behind closed eyes, the smell of napalm in their dreams. They had fought for a cause they no longer understood, in a war their country wished to forget. Some found solace in silence, others in brotherhood. But the war clung to them like humidity, invisible, inescapable. In Vietnam, fields still hid mines. Children played beside rusted helmets. In America, veterans gathered at memorial walls, tracing names carved into black stone, reflections mingling with the engraved dead. One soldier said quietly, "We were the children of the greatest generation, and we came home old men." The price of war was not measured in territory or treaties, but in the echoes it left behind, in hearts, in soil, in memory. Today the jungle has reclaimed the scars. Roots crawl over rusted tanks, vines clutch at forgotten bunkers. The land has healed, but the ghosts remain. Birdsong replaces the sound of gunfire. Farmers till soil once soaked in blood. The rivers flow as they always did, patient, indifferent. For those who visit, Vietnam is no longer a battlefield but a teacher. It whispers of courage and futility, of endurance and loss. The war proved that power cannot conquer will, that machines cannot silence memory, and that sometimes the smallest nation can challenge the mightiest empire and survive. In the end, no one truly won. But the world learned, the jungle swallowed armies, yet it could not swallow the lessons they left behind, that every war begins with certainty and ends with questions, that victory means little when humanity is lost. As the mist rises once more over the green canopy, the wind carries a single truth, that the jungle forgets nothing and history forgives no one.